going to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats, and joining us over the phone is Kyle Tucker, who writes for the Courier Journal down in Kentucky. Kyle, thanks for coming on the show. And have you filled out your bracket yet? And who do you have winning the national title?
Yeah, it won't surprise anybody. I think a lot of America will pick the same team. It's hard for me to imagine watching them all year, having seen them, followed them through the Bahamas in the summer, playing against much older international professional teams, and they'd barely been together, and they looked great then, and they've gotten better and better all year. I can't see Kentucky losing to anyone at this point.
Kyle, well, that's all we got for you, Kyle. Thanks a lot.
You just confirmed what we thought all along. Thanks, Kyle.
No problem.
Hey, Kyle, how good are these guys? I mean, we get to see them, when they're on national TV, and we see what they do to the opponent. I'm wondering, do you get to watch them in practice? And is it true that sometimes the practices are even better than the games because they're more competitive than the games?
Yeah, I watched them practice a few times in the preseason, and like I said, I saw them down in the Bahamas. I went with them to the Bahamas. Tough draw of an assignment there. Spent 8 or 9 days in the Bahamas with them. But yeah, in practice, it's impressive. I would argue that probably some of their high-level practices have been better competition for them than all but maybe 4 games this year, because it's two teams full of pros, especially before Alex Poitras got hurt. Before he got hurt, they had legitimately 10 guys who at some point in their careers are projected to go in an NBA draft. They may have the number 1 overall pick in Karl Towns, and right there with them is Willie Cauley-Stein, another big guy who could be a top 5 pick. And so it is impressive to watch, and I think really that's the thing about this team is maybe there's not an Anthony Davis on this team, although I think Karl Anthony Towns' path has reminded me a little bit of Davis's. He's so good now that we forget when he got here as a teenager, a young freshman. He was good, but he got better and better and better, and his offensive game really developed over the course of the 1 year he was at Kentucky, to the point that late in his freshman year he was shooting some threes. Karl Anthony Towns has been on a similar arc, but there's no guy that's that good on this team. But what gets you is just they're not bad at any position, and they're too deep at every position, and it just overwhelms teams. They get to they get 30 minutes into a game, and teams may hang around, but at that 10-minute mark, some of them said the other day, that's when we hit the gas. That's when we know we got them, and it always ends the same way.
Our guest is Kyle Tucker, the UK writer from the Courier Journal, one of the most well-respected newspapers in the country, and as someone who worked for the commercial people in Memphis, we always sort of looked at the Louisville Courier Journal as the other paper in the South, along with Atlanta, that those were the 3 great papers in the South. And my visits there have always reconfirmed how great the Courier Journal and the writers are. Now that I've set you up and made you feel good, Kyle, let's talk about what kind of team can beat Kentucky, if that's at all possible. In my mind, it's going to take a team with one of the great centers in college basketball, a team with a great set of backcourt players that are young and aggressive and can shoot from the three-point line. And it's going to take a team with a great coach, a guy that's won a national championship. Would you agree with that theory, or what do you think?
You sound like you're describing Duke.
I was going to say, that sounds like Duke to me.
I was just generalizing. I was generalizing.
You don't have to use euphemisms here. We can call them Duke.
So, I mean, Duke didn't win its conference tournament. There's talk that a team like Arizona that's very athletic, that there's a team like Virginia that plays great defense and slows it down, which might take Kentucky out of its rhythm. But more importantly, you're a lot closer than we are. What kind of team would it take? And you don't have to be specific, but we'd certainly like for you to beat Kentucky.
Well, here's the thing. I think any discussion of this, what kind of team can beat Kentucky, starts first with Kentucky has to play a bad game or less than its best. If Kentucky is at its best or anywhere close to it, there is nobody. There just isn't. Nobody's as deep. Nobody's as talented. Nobody is as big. if they're on, you're not beating them. So start with, at minimum, Kentucky plays a B game, and I'd say probably somewhere in the C to C plus range would be your best bet. And then somebody else has got to play A or A plus and shoot the lights out. You talk about have a great center and some guards that can make shots and a great coach. That does sound like Duke, and Duke, I think, could challenge that way offensively. But Duke, I just don't think Duke's good enough defensively, and I think Okafor, for as good as he is, all those guys that Kentucky could throw at him, they may neutralize some of his offense, and he cannot defend them. He is not a good enough defender. And if it's a close game late, he can't be on the floor. And if he is, they're going to foul him because he's shooting, 40, 50% from the free throw line. And it's the reason that I'm beginning to think if I have the number one pick in the NBA draft, I take Karl Anthony Towns because he's a great defender. He leads them in shot blocking when they have on a team that's got Willie Cauley-Stein, the best overall defender in the country. And his offensive game has been incredible. And in the last 13 games, Towns, who's 6'11", 250 with size 20 shoes, is shooting 91% from the free throw line.
Yeah, you brought up Anthony Davis, and I thought of him more as going to be kind of a Midland offensive player and a very, very good defensive player. Boy, he has turned out to be a major, big-time, major league offensive player in this league.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think when a lot of guys evaluate, like, if he's not already, can he be a good shooter? You look at free throws, and Towns, he's shooting 90% for 13 games. He's started to step away and hit. His little jump hook is I don't know what the percentage is. It's got to be at least 75%. And in high school, people don't even know or remember now, but he was a 3-point shooter in high school. Calipari just doesn't want him to do that. But he'll develop a jump shot where he can get out away from the basket and shoot the ball. His ceiling is very, very, very high, and so. I'm not sure Duke can do it. Wisconsin, people say Wisconsin because they need, Kentucky had to have an Aaron Harrison, late 3-pointer, one of 3 in a row that he hit to clinch games to beat Wisconsin last year. And so, maybe they can be competitive. Well, I think Wisconsin is about the same team it was last year, and Kentucky's much better than it was last year. Willie Cauley-Stein didn't play in that game. He was injured. Put him on Frank Kaminsky. I'm not sure what Frank Kaminsky can do. I really believe Davis, similar. Cauley-Stein is the best defensive player, certainly the best defensive big man in the country. And since then, they've added Karl Towns. They've added Devin Booker, a great freshman shooter. Tyler Ulis is, I don't know if you can find a better backup point guard in the country than Tyler Ulis. They've added all these pieces. Trey Lyles may be a lottery pick as well. He's a freshman. Those were not on this team last year when Wisconsin still couldn't beat Kentucky. So I have a hard time buying that. In their region, if Notre Dame shot the lights out, maybe, but they don't have any size. And so, again, the way I started this call, it's hard for me to imagine anybody can get it done, and nobody can do it, I don't think, unless Kentucky's a little bit off or maybe a lot off.
I'm going to tell the two of you guys, do not sleep on the Buffalo Bulls because, as Kyle remembers, if I'm not mistaken, in November at halftime, Bobby Hurley, who was a great guard in college basketball, now a very good coach, had his team up by 5 over Kentucky at halftime.
I've already fallen asleep on Buffalo. I'm sorry to tell you that, Woody. I don't know that I even have them winning a game in this tournament. Hey, last thing, Kyle. You and Woody and I, we've covered many teams that have gone deep into the season undefeated. And what you find out is the pressure starts building. The pressure from the media, pressure from the fans, pressure internally. And there are some coaches who have told me and who have told Woody, you know what? I wouldn't mind if my team lost a game just to take the pressure off.
Well, this would be a good time to do it.
No, this is not a good time for Kentucky. But I'm wondering, is this Kentucky team, despite the fact they're undefeated and could be the first undefeated team since the Hoosiers of '76, is this Kentucky team pressure-proof?
I think they are. I wondered about that as it went along and as it built and built and built. But, a couple of reasons. The core of this group, we talked about some great freshmen, but the core, the heart of this team is veteran guys. Cauley-Stein's a junior. The Harrison twins are sophomores. The heart of this team has been through it before, and they went through the huge pressure this pretty unfair probably last year when they were starting 5 freshmen. Before the season, there was 40-0 talk last year, and of course they didn't come anywhere close to living up to that during the year. And then they finally, the pressure, I mean, it got to them last year, no doubt about it. It got to them. The expectation was way too heavy on a bunch of freshmen, but that group, they recovered from that unbelievable pressure and made it all the way to the national championship game. And now those guys are back. I think the pressure was old hat to them. It didn't feel like pressure. And I think they also, it's just a confidence right now. It doesn't feel like pressure when you think you're the best team by far, when you think you're going to go out and bludgeon every team you play, and I think they do. I think they just have total confidence. I don't think it's weighing on them. And Calipari said the other night on Selection Sunday, now it flips around. Now the pressure's on everybody else because, you could lose to us during the regular season and you go on your merry way, no big deal. But now, I think he said, now you're strapped to the chair. Now if you lose to Kentucky, you're done. You're out. And everybody's in the same position. Everyone has to go undefeated now. Every team in the tournament has to win every game. And so I think it does equalize it. It pretty much neutralizes any pressure that's left. They were going to have to, even if they lost in the SEC championship game, it was going to reset and it was going to be the exact same amount of pressure. You got to win 6 games regardless, and that's what they have. And I don't think that's even going to come into play now. And from Calipari's perspective, I was there the night he won his first national championship in New Orleans in 2012. And one of the first things he said, he didn't say much at all. It didn't seem real celebratory on the podium. And then we got him outside the locker room, and he said one of the first things he said was, "What do I want to do next? Before I finish coaching, I want to coach a team that goes 40-0. And why? Because they say it can't be done. So let's go get it." And he wants it. I've talked to some of his former assistants. He's been talking about it since he was at Memphis. He wants to do something nobody's ever done, and he's hunting that thing down.
Well, Kyle, we really appreciate your time, and if Kentucky does in fact get to the Final Four, and we expect them to, we might be giving you another call. And if they don't get to the Final Four, I don't know that we're ever going to talk to you again. But thanks, Kyle.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, that's.